Hey, third grade. Welcome to Unit 3, Week 2. My favorite part of Monday is the genre. We all know that. Let's look at our purpose. I can identify features of a historical fiction. Well, here's our to-do. Watch genre mini lesson, this mini lesson right here, and then complete your Monday genre workbook page. You can click on this link right here in your Google Slides to get to this page, a surprise visit. And look at that. Our first question asks about how the text is a historical fiction. So that will be our purpose today. When you are reading this short text and then answering the questions, make sure you do as I do in this video. Restate your questions and use the text to answer those questions. You can come back to this video to help you answer the questions because we will be answering the questions together in this video. Our purpose as readers today. Genre. I can identify features of a historical fiction. I love this anchor chart in the middle. Historical fiction. It is a story with fictional characters. So you see these are fictional characters that it's set in a real time in history. So there really was a time in history where there were cowboys who rode on horses, and you might read about a real cowboy with other fictional characters. There is also a real historical event that takes place where people vote. This is a fake character doing something real, voting. A historical fiction is a story with made-up characters who take part in real events from history. We have to be patient for our tools to disappear. A historical fiction has illustrations that show the story takes place in the past. So, for example, Jane's Discovery is a historical fiction. This illustration shows it's taking place in the past because we can use the clothing that Jane is wearing. She's got a button-down blouse with ruffles on the sleeve. She has an apron over her skirt. In this historical event, women and girls didn't really wear pants. They only wore dresses or skirts. And then she has these high boots on that are pretty fashionable now. But you wouldn't see someone wearing an apron over their skirt, most likely nowadays. So that shows that this is historical. Here is another book that you will be reading on your own this week, On the Ball. This is a historical fiction about baseball. We are going to go in the text and read about Jane's discovery. After we're done reading, we're going to answer these 4 questions, just like you are going to do on your workbook page. So what I like to do as a reader is I like to set my purpose and read the questions so that I know what answers I'm looking for. Number 1, how do you know that this text is historical fiction? Well, that's our purpose for reading today. And I remember the features of a historical fiction: events that take place in the past, made-up characters, illustrations that show it take place in the past. So I'm getting my brain as a reader ready. Number 2, historical fiction sometimes includes real people from history. Sometimes. Name one real person and one made-up character in the story. So we're going to look for one real person and a made-up character. Number 3, what text feature does the text include? I remember looking at my anchor chart, illustrations that show the story took place in the past. That's a text feature. Number 4, how does the illustration help show that the text is historical fiction? All right, let's go into our text today and see if we can find these answers. Welcome to our historical fiction, Jane's Discovery. And our purpose today is to identify those features of this historical fiction. Jane's Discovery. I wonder what Jane is going to discover. Our essential question is, how can one person change the way you think? So maybe Jane's going to discover a person that will change the way she thinks. I wonder if that person will be our real person from history. Jane slammed the door of the log cabin and raced toward the Indiana woods. Mother and father insisted that Jane go to school and learn to read. It was September of 1825, and Jane wanted to help on the farm like her brothers. Therefore, she told her parents no and refused to learn to read. That evidence right there tells me this is historical fiction, because in today's world, all kids are taught how to read. And Jane isn't in school right now. She's working on the family farm. But her parents, her father insisted that Jane go to school and learn to read. So that tells me that not all kids go to school. And in the past, not all kids went to school. Jane scooped up her long skirts and splashed through a small stream. Running helped her collect her thoughts, so she ran for what seemed like hours. She dashed around a tree and wasn't paying attention. As a result, she tripped over a pair of long legs stretched out in the grass. The legs belonged to her neighbor, Abe Lincoln. Wait a second. I'm going to pause because I remember on one of my questions, it said that historical fictions sometimes include one real person from history and a made-up character. Abe Lincoln is a real person from history. Everyone knows who Abe Lincoln is. Who's Abe Lincoln? Yeah, he was the president that freed slaves. So there's our one real person in this historical fiction. And our one made-up person must be Jane. Abe was leaning against a tree reading a book. He smiled, stood up, and extended his arm to help Jane up. Jane recognized Abe and knew what a hard worker he was. But she also heard he was not like the other 16-year-old boys in Perry County. Abe was different because he spent all of his spare time reading books. "Why are you running so fast?" Abe asked. "Are you hurt?" Jane frowned. "No, I'm all right," she said. "I'm running because I'm upset. My parents want me to learn to read, and I told them no." So again, this is a historical fiction because this event has actually happened in history. Back in the 1800s, kids worked on their family farm, and it wasn't a regular routine for kids to always go to school to learn to read. We also have one real character, Abe Lincoln, and one made-up character, Jane. We also have an illustration that shows this took place in the past. By looking at their clothing, we know that this is a historical event or historical fiction. Let's read on. Abe looked down at his book and then at Jane. "Reading can change your life," he said quietly. "Meet me here tomorrow and I'll prove to you how important reading is." Jane met Abe the next afternoon. He showed her a book about George Washington. One of his favorite teachers had donated it to him, and he had read it many times. Abe began to read aloud while Jane listened carefully. He read about Washington and what a great leader he was. He read about Washington's courage and bravery. "Someday, I want to be as courageous as George Washington," said Abe proudly. "Someday I will be president of the United States too." These are all real events in history. These are features that show this is a historical fiction. "I believe you will make a great president," said Jane. "Look at what a good leader you are now. You've completely changed my mind about reading. Abe smiled. Tell your parents you will learn to read, he said. Then meet me here every day after school. We will read together, and I will help you. So, as a third grader, our purpose was to identify features of a historical fiction. And we think about this essential question as we're reading to help us to better understand the text. How can one person change the way you think? Well, this historical fiction included one real person and one made-up character. The real person was Abe Lincoln. The made-up character was Jane. The real historical event was that Jane needed to learn how to read back in the 1800s. The essential question helped us to understand that Abe Lincoln was the real character in the past that helped our made-up character change her mind about reading. He enjoyed reading so much that he inspired Jane to start reading. So let's go back to our questions now that we have close read our text, looking for features of a historical fiction. Now, I can always go back in the video as a third grader and use this anchor chart to help me remember the features of a historical fiction. You can use your Google Slides to help you remember the features of a historical fiction. So the features of a historical fiction is a story with made-up characters who take part in real events from history. It has illustrations. Let me move my screen down. It has illustrations that show that the story takes place in the past. And on your Google Slides, your computer screen won't have the tools at the bottom. You will be able to see that. So now I'm going to use that anchor chart to help me answer these questions. And remember, third graders, we're going to answer the questions using what we know about historical fiction, and we have to restate the question. How do you know that this text is historical fiction? Well, I can cross off my question words, and that will help me to get a better start at restating the question. I can restate this question by saying, you know that this text is historical fiction by, or I can just simply start the sentence by saying, this text is historical fiction. In blue, I have my restatement with my why. This text is a historical fiction because it has a made-up character that meets a real person from the past. So I used my slide with my anchor chart, the features of a historical fiction. You can also use this video to help you answer your questions. Number 2, historical fiction sometimes includes real people from history. Name one real person and one made-up character in the story. Okay, so I have to restate this question. What does the question want me to do? It wants me to name one real person and one made-up character in the story. So I'm going to start my sentence. One real person is, one made-up character is. One real person is, that's in blue, that's my restatement. You can use that to help you when you answer your questions. Abraham Lincoln. He's a real person from our past. He was one of our presidents. One made-up character is Jane. I know she's made up. One way is sometimes authors will just name the character the first name. They won't have a last name. So that shows me that she's made up. What text feature does the text include? I'm going to restate my question. The text feature the text includes is an illustration. This illustration here is a feature that shows us more about the text. And our last question, how does the illustration help show that the text is historical fiction? Here's this arrow showing the clothing. Jane is wearing an apron over her skirt. That shows that this fashion is from a long time ago. The illustration helps show that the text is historical by, that's our restatement, it's in blue, showing the kind of clothing that people wore in that time period. All right, third grade, you are now going to go to your Reading Wonders backpack, and you are going to identify the features of a historical text. Good luck, and use this video to help you.